Hello, my name is James Gibson. Tonight I'd like to talk to you about a subject that I'm sure has touched each and every audience member in one way, shape, or form, and that's the issue of terrorism. I'd also like to touch on three of the reasons that terrorism seems to be the scourge of the 21st century so far. And I'd also like to let my audience members know that despite what the talking heads and the politicians say, that terrorism doesn't have to be the new norm for America. We don't have to suffer through this. We don't have to put up with one more terrorist attack. Now, I'm sure many of you remember the September 11th terrorist attacks. I know I sure do. I'll never forget the images of fellow Americans leaping to their deaths, some alone, some hand in hand, because any death was preferable than to being roasted alive by burning jet fuel. I'm sure many of you also remember the recent Boston bombings committed by two Islamic terrorists from Chechnya, no less. Chechens that were let in here not even a year after the September 11th terrorist attacks. And I'm sure many of you remember the resulting police manhunt and the heroic capture by the Massachusetts State Police, the Boston PD, and the FBI of these two terrorists. These things are things that are seared into our public consciousness. But three things that I think that get lost in the immediate aftermath of these terrifying acts of mass murder and mayhem are, number one, that we bring this on ourselves. Excuse me. We vote spineless, feckless politicians into office every election cycle that could care less about the safety of you or your family or your loved ones, my family or my loved ones. The only thing they care about is getting your vote the next election cycle. Excuse me. And they're bought and paid for by Saudi Arabian oil money. All the while, they're more than happy to denigrate our domestic oil companies in a shameful attempt at class warfare to pit the haves against the have-nots. And for too long we've been sold the fallacy that we're an oil-poor, an energy-poor nation. We are an energy-rich nation, an oil-rich nation. You notice when Obama talks about we only have 2% of the oil reserves, he says it real quick, you know, that's reserves. That's not 2% of the world's oil. We are an oil-rich nation, but we have the EPA and we have this whole bureaucracy that, and not only the whole bureaucracy, but the whole environmental movement, which is really the home for socialism since the collapse of communism in the Eastern Bloc. We have them preventing us with their lobby and their bought and paid for Democrat socialist politicians. We have them blocking us from getting our own oil. All the while, these politicians are sending trillions of dollars every year of your hard-earned money to the Middle East, to a Middle East that seems bent on murdering Americans. The second thing I think that is lost on the American people is that our unfocused foreign policy is critical in stopping these attacks. For too long we've been duped into believing that we have to be the policemen of the world. That we've been duped into believing that Arab peoples and nations do not have the right to self-determination, to determine the destinies of their own lands and their own peoples. All the while claiming our most important ally in the Middle East is Israel, and they're killing right this very minute innocent men, women, and children in Palestine. That, I think, is the crux of the problem. They want us out of there. They want us to stay out of their affairs, and to do so is not isolationism by any means. It's an observance of the Monroe Doctrine, which you may call outdated, but which states, if it doesn't, now paraphrasing, if it doesn't affect the interest of America, then we stay out of it. That's a very, very apt and timely doctrine that I think that we would do well to pay heed in these times. The third thing that I think is lost on many, if not most Americans, is that we let these people freely enter our country. And we let them enter our country without so much as a thorough background screening most of the time. Some of them may get it, but not most of them. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that there are 3 things that we can do to stop terrorism, and it will stop terrorism. Number 1, we vote for politicians that are not spineless, that support domestic oil production, and that will cut off the flow of money to the Saudi Arabian terrorists. Number 2, I think that we need to focus our foreign policy and base it more on the Monroe Doctrine. We need to focus our foreign policy on our interests, nothing else. Number 3, the third thing is, I think that we need to realize we're not the policemen of the world, and that certain things are not our business. Other nations are sovereign. Thank you for your time. Good night.